Exposed. The amazing transformation of a billionaire. After hearing his waitress's touching plea, Jack Bennett slipped into the familiar booth at the diner, rain pounding against the windows. As he slid his phone from his pocket, the world around him faded into a background blur of clinking dishes and hushed conversations. Stock prices flashed across the screen, numbers dancing maddeningly in his mind. The scent of fried eggs held no allure today. His stomach was a heavy stone. He had become a stranger in his own life, a life filled with untold riches yet devoid of any warmth or purpose. Lily, the waitress, approached with a tentative smile that contrasted sharply with the storm outside. She balanced a steaming cup of black coffee on her tray, her young face marked by lines of responsibility that didn't belong to someone her age. "Here you go, Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice soft yet firm, a spark of light flickering in the monochrome of his existence. Jack barely nodded, his attention glued to the phone as she lowered her gaze. "Just a minute, please," she added suddenly, an urgency breaking through the monotony. Jack's heart raced slightly, an unfamiliar instinct stirring. It wasn't like him to listen, to care. Yet, her raw honesty felt captivating. "I'm just hoping to find a way to help my family," she continued, glancing back at him as if trying to bridge a widening chasm between their worlds. "It's hard, you know. Making enough to keep the lights on and food on the table for my siblings. Sometimes it feels like drowning." She returned a moment later, her warmth still lingering like the aroma in the air. Before he could respond, walls began closing in on him. Jack was used to being admired, revered even, yet her plea coated him in a thick layer of guilt that he hadn't felt in years. The juxtaposition made his breath shallow. Here she was, toiling under a burden he could hardly fathom, while he floated through an ocean of luxury. I don't know what to say," he stammered, words jumbled in his mind, fighting against a rising tide of discomfort. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The intensity of her plight echoed in his ears as Jack returned to his thoughts, racing like the storm outside. The diner, an institution on the brink of extinction, threatened to take the heart of the community with it. Lily's worries intertwined with guilt coursing through him. Could he actually do something? Those thoughts ignited an unsettling question within. What would it cost him to help? Juggling the urge to remain the distant billionaire he had always been against the desire to become a figure of compassion gnawed at his insides. He wrestled with the concept of loss. What would happen to his carefully constructed empire if he let his walls down for an innately human cause? As meetings with investors closed in, the pressure to conform lurked in the shadows, promising scorn for any deviation from profit-driven motives. Eventually, confrontation loomed menacingly at the horizon, his colleagues' disapproval scalding. Jack could feel the stakes rising, and in that simmering tension, he faced his greatest dilemma. Could he renounce the solitude of his golden cage, place his fortune on the line, and step into the storm that was Lily's reality? With every moment that passed, he felt parts of himself disintegrating, peeling away the facade of indifference he maintained for so long. The diner's closing echoed relentlessly in his mind, clashing with a desperate yearning to matter. Jack stood on the precipice, heart pounding, his resolve engulfed by mounting anxiety. The clock ticked down to a moment of inevitable choice, one that could unravel the life he had known and thrust him into a world much bigger than himself. A world where every day wasn't just living, but fighting for something that mattered. Would he dare step into the storm that had been raging within him? Jack's mind whirled, an internal tempest brewing with every insecure heartbeat. The weight of his existence settled heavily in his chest. He couldn't bear to be the man he had always been, the one who skirted around suffering without a second thought. It was time for a real confrontation, one that reached beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. Lily's words lingered as he left the diner. They gripped him like the storm outside, unsettling yet invigorating. Jack felt a pulse, an echo deep within that hinted at a longing to belong, to matter beyond the walls of his lavish life. His car roared to life, but he barely noticed the scenery passing by. Instead, he clung tightly to the questions circling his mind. What did it mean to help? What would his actions mean in the grand scheme of his life? That evening, he sat at his executive desk, papers strewn across the surface like fallen leaves. Each report, each projection signaled the same truth. His empire teetered at the edge of a precipice, dangerously close to a decline he had predicted. He could address that. He could innovate, adapt. Yet, beneath that need for control lay a nagging uncertainty. Was there anything he genuinely cared about, apart from profits and status? The world of finance seemed grim. Numbers collated in neat columns, devoid of humanity. But it was during moments like this, in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, that he couldn't escape the image of Lily, the burdens she bore swiftly returning to haunt him. It struck him like a lightning bolt. He was not just a ruler of industries, but a man in the quiet moments, one capable of empathy, humanity. He seized his phone, fingers trembling as he scrolled through his contacts. Was it foolish to reach out for help? Perhaps he could initiate a community development fund. An idea solidified on an impulse that tasted sweet with possibility. He needed to face the skeptics, but he needed a plan. Jack felt anxiety rousing at the idea. His colleagues would never support a venture that didn't promise immediate wealth. Thoughts raced as he jotted down notes. Community engagement, sustainable businesses, local trainings for young adults. They weren't just ideas, but a foundation for something new, something real. This wasn't just a byproduct of guilt. It felt exhilarating, an undercurrent of purpose pulling him deeper into exploration of a life like none he had led before. Yet doubt stalked him like a ghost. What if it failed? What if his markets reacted, rejecting his shift in direction? What would happen if he became a target for derision and scorn, the once admired billionaire, now a naive idealist? Reality encroached, reminding him of the potential upheaval thrust upon his legacy. Jack drew a deep breath, focusing on his evolving vision. He was at a crossroads, confronting the very essence of who he wanted to be. In his heart, he felt the stirrings of a mission, but he would have to craft it carefully, armed with knowledge and conviction. He needed allies, people who understood both the weight of responsibility and the possibility of profound change. As the night deepened, an idea crystallized in his mind. He would return to the diner, embrace the raw energy pulsing from Lily's experience. Not just to comfort her, but to tap into the hidden depths of his own resolve. The next day, he would walk back into that diner and carve a path forward, a leap into the uncertain depths of his own potential. But as he prepared to step away from the desk, a fresh wave of doubt crashed violently, unsettled by the permanence of his decision. To start, he needed a voice, a confidant who would understand, someone who could help construct bridges instead of walls. With that revelation, a new sense of urgency coursed through him. Would Jack find the courage to embrace his new destiny, or would he retreat back into safety, suffocating under the pressures of his past? The answer hung palpably in the air, charged and electric as the dawn approached. The sun crested the horizon, casting a muted light through the blinds of Jack's office, illuminating the scattered remnants of the previous night's turmoil. His heart raced as he replayed the resolve he had felt, a spark igniting a flame that threatened to consume him. Climbing out of bed, he reminded himself that today was not merely another day in corporate ambition. It was the day he would act. A steely determination surged through him when he thought of Lily. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a symbol of something he desperately wanted to understand. Real connection. Meaningful impact. He dressed with purpose, envisioning every word he would say to her. But as the crisp morning air hit his face, doubt whispered in the recesses of his mind, questioning the validity of these burgeoning aspirations. Driving to the diner, his palms gripped the steering wheel with mounting intensity. What would he say? Was this leap into vulnerability even worth it? He replayed his plans. A community development fund that would harness local resources to educate young people and create jobs. Yet the nagging voice in his head insisted he was veering into foolishness. Jack wrestled with these thoughts, each passing minute intensifying his internal struggle. Finally reaching the diner, he hesitated at the entrance. The familiar scent of coffee mingled with the chatter of morning patrons, but it held no comfort. Instead, he felt like a trespasser, invading a world that had always been separate from his own. Mustering courage, he stepped inside, scanning the room until he spotted Lily behind the counter. Her presence seemed to anchor him, drawing forth the conviction he had cultivated all night. He approached with a rapid thump of his heart, but her smile disarmed him. "Hey, Jack, good to see you again," she welcomed, wiping her hands on a towel. Her sincerity flooded him with warmth, yet he was aware of the walls he still carried. "Lily," he began, the weight of his words heavy with intention. "Can we talk? I mean, really talk?" Puzzled yet intrigued, she nodded, leading him to a booth tucked away in the corner. The moment felt crucial. He could either spiral into uncertainty or harness that vulnerability. As they sat down, Jack felt an exposé of himself unraveling before her. The world he had always navigated with strategy and calculation now felt distant. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day," he started, watching her expression shift from curiosity to attentive interest. "About how the community needs support," she interjected, her brown eyes lighting up. "It really does. There's so much potential that gets overlooked." Her enthusiasm ignited a flame within him. "I want to help. I want to do something big. Not just for profit, but to really change lives." The words spilled out before he could filter them, raw and unrealized. Her brows furrowed in cautious optimism. "You mean like a fund? That could actually make a difference?" "Yes, exactly that. But I'm terrified that it'll flop. What if no one believes in it? And if it fails, then what's my legacy?" He leaned back, the confession crashing over him, exposing his deepest fears. Lily paused, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Nothing worth having comes without a risk, right? You could be a catalyst for so much good. But you also need to know what you're up against." Jack felt the walls tremble slightly as his vision broadened. It wasn't just about starting a fund. It was about seeing this venture through all the uncertainties. "Can we work together? I need someone who understands the grassroots to help guide me." "Yes, I'd love to," she replied, genuine excitement dancing in her voice. Suddenly her support felt like a lifeline rather than a crutch. But as they talked, he realized that stepping forward was not simply a professional move. It was peeling back layers of privilege he had long hidden behind. As the conversation flowed, Jack found himself faced with deeper questions: the ethics of his wealth, the responsibilities entailed, and whether he could truly integrate his new mission into a life once dominated by cold ambition. As they continued discussing collaborations, a sense of intricacy enveloped him. Beyond plans and budgets lay unseen battles within himself. The tension grew palpable, and just as he found a glimmer of clarity for the future, a sudden thought emerged. "Lily," he said, a mix of urgency and trepidation shivering through him. "What if the pushback is not just outside, but within my own company? The ones I thought would support me might just oppose everything I'm trying to do." Her smile faded slightly, but determination remained. "Then you'll have to confront that too, Jack. The time has come to face the naysayers and the doubters." He nodded, taking in the enormity of her words. It was not just the world outside that needed to transform. It was the very heart of his professional life that demanded reckoning. He felt a growing sense of purpose, a willingness to wrestle his demons and forge ahead. Without hesitation, a new revelation took root. Jack contemplated the possibility of bringing this transformation back into his corporation, confronting those who would mock or resist. Yet beneath the rising tide of resolve lurked an unanswered question, palpable in the air between them. How far was he truly willing to go in this transformation, and what would he lose in the process? As Jack faced Lily, the weight of his choices hung heavily. Would he have the courage to confront his own legacy and the response it would evoke, not just from others, but from himself? The answer loomed before him, charged with potential, yet shrouded in uncertainty, igniting a fresh wave of doubt, just as strong as his commitment. The remnants of his conversation with Lily replayed in Jack's mind as he drove away from the diner, the weight of her words echoing against the backdrop of his corporate life. The vibrant vision of a community fund clashed sharply with the sterile walls of his boardroom, a battlefield where dreams went to die. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, contemplating his next steps and finding a twisted comfort in his internal conflict. As he arrived at his office, the cacophony of ringing phones and bustling employees greeted him like an old friend. Outside, the sun blazed on a new day, yet inside, shadows of doubt clung to him as he exchanged pleasantries with colleagues. His mind, once sharp and calculated, felt clouded by a new purpose, an urgency that turned every mundane task into a crucible for self-examination. Sitting at his desk, Jack glanced at the various reports piled high. Metrics and trends that once defined him now appeared increasingly trivial. He reflected on his legacy, cringing at the thought of how he had measured success by profits alone rather than impact. The drive to enhance life through work, rather than line pockets, was uncharted territory, yet it was the only path that felt genuine to him. Jack's distraction was palpable as he reviewed financial projections. Every number dispassionately documented the feral greed of his corporate world. But now, he felt an electric compulsion to reframe all that was familiar. Instinctively, he reached for his phone to text Lily, realizing that he depended on her insight more than he had anticipated. It wasn't just about collaboration. It was about guidance and authenticity, qualities that eluded his tightly controlled corporate life. "Hey, can we meet again tonight? I need your help to work through some ideas," he typed, his fingers dancing nervously over the screen before hitting send. The reply came quickly. "Absolutely! I'm free after the diner closes. Can't wait to brainstorm." A wave of relief washed over him, but it was laced with pressure. He couldn't approach this meeting half-heartedly. He had to unearth every fear, every obstacle, every question that might surface from his board or his own insecurities. As dusk settled on the city, Jack spent his time preparing. He started outlining objectives for their meeting, steering through the outlines of the community fund. But with each point he considered, thoughts of his company's potential backlash loomed like storm clouds. He had to confront his executive team about reorienting their mission, a task as daunting as confronting an adversary. While reviewing potential pitches, he stumbled upon the names of several leading investors who thrived on exclusivity and returns. He could hear their voices laced with skepticism, hear them question whether such an initiative would cost more than it would yield. Jack had played the game long enough to recognize the condescension veiled in their concern. They'd have questions about feasibility and market impact, but not about the human lives involved. The evening air brisk against his skin as he walked back to the diner, his heart pounded with anticipation and trepidation. Was he really ready to challenge everything he had built? Or was it all an illusion, a fleeting moment inspired by a waitress's dream? As Jack entered the diner, he glanced at Lily, who met him with an encouraging smile, an unspoken understanding flowing between them. The air was thick with the possibility of change, and Jack realized that this meeting could set the framework for not just his future, but for the future he envisioned for countless others. "Let's get started," he said, the determination in his voice betraying the wrestle within. But as they dove into discussions, a startling revelation emerged. Jack had to confront not just the corporate titans and their scrutiny, but also his own fear of losing status. It suddenly struck him that stepping into this new role would require him to redefine his relationships, perhaps even break bonds with those who prioritize profit over purpose. Jack, Lily's voice snapped him back from his spiraling thoughts. You're going to have to prepare for a fight, one that might cost you more than you expect. Are you ready for that? His mind raced as he pondered the depths of her question. How could he possibly prepare for what he might lose? Was he ready to confront not just failure, but isolation from those who once supported him? The heavier the conversation became, the clearer it became that while he desired transformation, the price of that change lurked within reach, unyielding and real. What if I'm not? He admitted, vulnerability pouring from him like a long-buried truth. Lily leaned closer, her gaze steady. You won't know until you confront it. As the gravity of her statement settled in, Jack felt something shift within him. The path ahead was becoming more uncertain, yet an ember of resolve began to glow brighter. Tonight might be the first step, but new fears loomed larger than he anticipated. Was he prepared to face the consequences, even if that meant losing parts of himself he had clung to? With every moment, the stakes rose. Would he step into this unknown, or would he let the fear of the familiar drag him back into obscurity? As he stared into Lily's eyes, the most pressing question emerged. Who would he become when this was all over? Jack leaned forward, his palms pressed against the cool, lacquered wood of the diner table, a tether to his resolve amidst the swirling doubts. The lingering aroma of coffee and fried food was oddly comforting as he met Lily's determined gaze. Her energy radiated in stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of his corporate life. He felt a dissonance between the two worlds, one filled with profit margins and self-interest, the other alive with purpose and possibility. As they began to sketch out ideas for the community fund, each suggestion Lily made prompted Jack to dig deeper into his own beliefs and values. He questioned everything. What resources do we need? How will we measure success? Who can we involve? Beyond the standard metrics and bottom lines. This was a new paradigm, one that shimmered with potential yet cracked the brittle surface of his former identity. Think broader, Lily encouraged, her eyes shining with a vision that felt audacious. What impact do you want to have? This isn't just data. It's about actual lives. He found himself writing furiously, ideas coalescing into a tangible form that felt alive. He imagined a fund not merely driven by fiscal gain, but by stories and transformations. Each concept echoed a future where helping others fueled innovation, where collaboration replaced competition. But as her enthusiasm ignited his, an insidious voice whispered, reminding him of the consequences. What if the board rejects it? Jack hesitated, the fear crawling up his spine. What if they laugh me out the room? Then you find new allies who understand this vision, Lily responded fiercely, brushing aside his doubts. You're in a unique position to pioneer something extraordinary. You can redefine what success looks like. Don't let their skepticism stifle you. As conversation flowed, Jack realized that the real battle was not the one within the boardroom. It was with himself. The status quo had served him well, adorned with titles and accolades. However, standing at the precipice of uncertainty beckoned a transformation he could hardly comprehend. Was he ready to step away from the familiar comforts of his power? It was one thing to entertain the idea of change in the confines of this diner. It was another to confront his colleagues who thrived in traditional metrics of success. Would they dismiss him? Would they doubt his vision? That fear coiled tightly around his resolve. Driven by a potent mix of excitement and trepidation, Jack felt an overwhelming urge to forge ahead despite this swirling tempest. He voiced these fears, threading honesty into their brainstorming. What if they pull funding? Am I prepared to negotiate with investors who think it's a waste? The moment suspended between them, and for the briefest of instances, It felt like the entirety of his corporate existence hinged on this discussion. "Every incredible idea has faced resistance, Jack," Lily assured him. "Look at every great innovator, every visionary. They all faced doubt. It's part of the journey. But every step towards purpose matters. You just have to choose which side you want to stand on." As Jack absorbed her words, he felt the crack inside him widen. A flicker of self-doubt lingered, but so too did a surge of courage. Perhaps it was a flicker of his long-suppressed potential being rekindled, light piercing through the heavy fog of fear that had clouded his judgment for too long. In that moment, he understood that this initiative wasn't merely a project. It was a daring leap into a world where success wasn't measured solely by wealth, but by the impact made on individual lives. The outlines became sharper, fueled by an urgency that transcended spreadsheets and stock prices. The meeting with the board would be a turning point. But as the clock ticked away in the diner, a knot of anxiety gripped him. How would he cast this new vision? Would they even listen? Jack looked at Lily, a silent prayer caught in his throat. "I'm unearthing something I didn't know existed within me. Yet the fear of what I might lose feels suffocating." With an unwavering gaze, she replied, "Sometimes you have to lose sight of the safety net to gain a greater perspective. That's how you find who you truly are." A revelation dawned as Jack considered her words. The life he envisioned was within reach, but it would require every ounce of bravery he could muster. What would he risk? What would he become if he dared to challenge the system? The stakes loomed larger than ever. As adrenaline coursed through him, a singular thought crystallized in his mind. The time had come to face his true self, or risk losing everything that really mattered. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the fear of rejection steer him back to the safety of conformity? Jack sat in his office, the walls closing in like a vice, with a palpable heaviness resting on his shoulders. The fluorescent lights hummed a lullaby of dreary monotony as he reflected on his conversation with Lily. The crisp sheets of paper on his desk filled with sketches and ideas were mere echoes of a potential he had yet to fully embrace. He could almost hear her voice ebbing within him, urging him to push beyond what was comfortable. He shifted in his chair, allowing the tension in his body to settle. Yet beneath that initial calm, a tumultuous storm raged. Jack felt a mix of anticipation and dread wash over him as he stared at the boardroom agenda pinned to his dully colored wall. The meeting was close, and every tick of the clock magnified the reality. This was more than just a presentation. It was his identity on the line. As he tapped a pen against the desk, he questioned his strategy. How do you convince a table of skeptics who thrived on impressive profit figures that something as intangible as social impact could resonate with them? The weight of his past impelled him to dress his ideas in the language they understood. Metrics, forecasts, trends. Yet, reverting to mere numbers felt like shackling the very essence of what he envisioned. "No," he muttered under his breath. It was time to own this vision. He began jotting down key points, frameworks that didn't solely revolve around financial returns, but centered on meaningful engagement. He could almost see their faces, their skeptical brows furrowing, but beneath that fear ran an undercurrent of determination. The words, value creation, were transforming in his mind from a coinage related to profits into something more profound. Value for lives, for communities. The anxiety peaked when he thought about presenting the moral dilemma to his colleagues. Would he prioritize the temporary comforts of agreement and stability, or champion something that reflected deeper truths? Should he risk becoming a pariah among the elite? Jack decided to seek clarity. Pausing, he pulled out his phone and called Lily, seeking her wisdom. When she answered, her voice imbued a comforting persistence. "What are you hesitating over?" "I need to be authentic in this meeting," he confessed. "But what if it all backfires? Great change never came from playing it safe. You must inspire. Speak not just from your mind, but from your heart." "Your story is part of this initiative," she replied, her passion contagious. Suddenly, he envisioned the stories driving his motivations, of lives truly touched, of people overcoming their struggles, glimpses of hope ignited through simple acts of generosity. "Reconnect with your purpose, Jack," she added softly. "That's what your colleagues need to hear. The truth of why this matter matters to you." With newfound clarity, exhilaration flickered through him. The fear that once stifled him began to morph into a burning determination. It wasn't about winning over the board. It was about simply being honest, about exposing a truth that had long been buried beneath corporate frameworks. As he spoke to her, the boundaries of doubt transformed into stepping stones of awareness. "Thank you, Lily," he said, gratitude lacing his words. When he hung up, Jack felt a flicker of a vision, the impact he could cultivate if he banded together with those willing to break down the old frameworks. As he stared at the notes piled in front of him, he recognized this moment was significant. It was a commitment to himself, a pledge not to back down when faced with resistance. The next morning, as he prepared for the meeting, a sense of possibility surged through him. He would meet his colleagues not just as a number-crunching executive, but as a transformative leader willing to redefine success. As he entered the boardroom, with all eyes falling on him, the gravity of the moment enveloped him like a shroud. Could he truly embody the change he sought? With his heart racing, he took a deep breath and began to speak, ready to unravel his vision built upon the stories that mattered, the first step into uncharted territory. But just then, he noticed a familiar face among the audience, who was not there for encouragement, but as an unwavering critic. Could one voice, filled with dissent, unravel his carefully constructed resolve? Jack's heart plummeted, the warmth of newfound courage chilling under the weight of the familiar gaze cast toward him. It was Thomas, the CFO, a stalwart of the old guard, and a man whose critical eye had rendered many ideas stillborn before. Jack's resolve wavered momentarily. A quick flash of past meetings raced through his mind, where Thomas's dismissive nod had often been the death knell to innovation. In that split second, doubt wormed its way back into his psyche, battling with the determination he had just cultivated. He reminded himself of Lily's voice, resonating in his mind. "Reconnect with your purpose." He straightened his posture, the metaphorical shackles of anxiety tightening and quickening before his very eyes. This was it. The moment he had prepared for, an opportunity to step beyond traditional metrics and redefine the narrative that had long suffocated the firm. Jack cleared his throat, the room hanging on his every movement. "Thank you all for being here today. I don't just want to talk about numbers. I want to share a vision that connects our work to the very essence of who we are." As he spoke, he could see Thomas's brow furrow further, but Jack pressed on, throwing caution to the wind. He shared the stories of everyday heroes whose lives were touched by projects the company had initiated. Each account was a thread weaving through the fabric of profitability and responsibility, stitching them together. With every anecdote, he was transforming the atmosphere from cold skepticism into cautious intrigue. Each project is not just a metric, it's a heartbeat, a pulse in the community we often overlook, he asserted. Jack felt the current of emotion rising, his passion fueling the conviction behind his words. If we continue to isolate ourselves in the realm of profit, we risk losing everything that makes us human. Thomas shifted in his chair, visibly agitated. But Jack noticed a flicker of something else, a glimmer of doubt in his resolve. He recognized the strategy. The moment to introduce the hardest truth was upon him. "I understand the hesitation. Sustainability, social impact. These concepts can feel very abstract, especially when we are used to concrete numbers." He locked eyes with Thomas, unflinching. "But isn't it time we redefine what success means? Isn't it time we plant our roots in something deeper than the stock price?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jack could hear his own heartbeat drumming in his ears, and for a moment, he feared it might drown out the voices of his colleagues. However, it was then that the revelation hit him. not just the realization of his power in that moment, but a deeper understanding of himself emerging. He wasn't just trying to convince them, he was urging them to confront a legacy of choices that had left them empty. The tension broke when another voice emerged from the audience, an unexpected ally who had also been quietly observing. Maya from the marketing team, known for her lateral thinking. What if we took Jack's vision and formulated a metrics-driven approach that integrates both profitability and community impact? How can we use data to tell these stories in a way that resonates? Jack briefly registered Maya's proposal, exhilaration flooding him. Her intuitive leap reignited the hope that had almost slipped away. It was a declaration that he was not alone in this battle, igniting an ember among the skeptics. As the conversation began to evolve, Jack sensed a whirlpool of ideas forming. What if he helped ignite a revolution within his company, where profits were not merely a goal, but a consequence of meaningful engagement? But amid this flickering hope, the specter of Thomas loomed larger. The CFO's sharp inhalation hinted at a brewing storm. Let's not be naive, Jack. Our investors want guaranteed returns, not feel-good stories. In that daunting moment, Jack knew the fight was far from over. Would he allow fear to tether him to the status quo, or could he rally the very people around him to catalyze an unprecedented transformation? Driven by urgency, Jack gathered his thoughts, ready to respond, even as tension spiraled in the air. A battle was brewing, not just for a new project, but for the very vision of what their company could embody. The question lingered. Would he take a stand for his beliefs, or would he allow dissent to sabotage his mission to create a new paradigm? Jack's mind raced through potential responses, each calculation carrying the weight of a decision that could steer his destiny. The warmth of his ambition began to flounder against the icy pragmatism of Thomas's challenge. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues shift from Thomas to him. The pressure thickened, each moment stretching into eternity, and he realized what was at stake. More than just numbers, his very ideals of leadership. Thomas, he began slowly, his voice steady despite the clamor in his mind. It's not about replacing one set of metrics with another. It's about expanding our definition of value. We've been successful in profits, but what if we could also excel in purpose? That could ultimately strengthen our market position. Thomas's lips tightened, as Jack's boldness pushed against the defensiveness he had cultivated over decades. The tension had morphed into a palpable entity, wrapping around the room. Success shouldn't be a zero-sum game, Jack continued, emboldened by the flicker of agreement now visible among his coworkers. It's about finding ways to innovate with our values at the core. When customers connect emotionally with our mission, we can see a genuine loyalty that turns into profit. A flicker of recognition crossed Maya's face as she nodded thoughtfully. What if we challenge our existing frameworks? Let's develop a dual strategy integrating comprehensive impact analysis with traditional financial performance, demonstrating to investors that responsible capitalism can also lead to substantial gains. Jack savored the moment. Here was an unveiling not only of his vision, but also of a collaboration, a coalition forming amidst old constraints. Together, they might disrupt the rigidity of a historically staid environment. Exactly, he said, riding the wave of momentum. What if we introduced a new set of KPIs, key performance indicators that account for social metrics just as much as financial ones? We can create a report that showcases our impact alongside our profits. Data-driven narratives that demonstrate our holistic commitment. The fervor in his voice did not go unnoticed, but Thomas's skepticism remained steadfast. You're asking for a leap of faith, and faith doesn't sit well on Wall Street. What's the plan if this doesn't resonate with shareholders? You know as well as I do that this isn't simply an ideological exercise. It's about survival in a competitive market. Jack inhaled sharply, wrestling with urgency. This was not just a corporate pitch. It was an existential moment for him. Survival isn't just about treading water. It's about foresight. If we don't evolve, we become obsolete. Our investors will see an organization that is willing to grow, innovate, and engage in a meaningful way. The world is changing. Consumers are demanding more than just a price tag. As he spoke, a part of Jack recognized that deeper motivations had been stirred. This discussion was not merely transactional. It was a manifestation of his own yearning to belong to something greater than profit margins, a legacy echoing principles he held dear. The silence thickened, filled with potential outcomes but also laden with risks. Jack felt the stakes rise again, the urgency of the moment wrapping around his resolve like chains. Would he risk everything he had fought for, or challenge the existing paradigm and inspire collective courage? What if we pilot a project that incorporates these principles on a smaller scale? Maya interjected, her enthusiasm infectious. It could serve as a reference point, a case study to present to investors without fully diving into a complete overhaul. Jack caught her enthusiasm like a spark, searching Thomas's face for an inclination of receptiveness. It was time to take the final leap. Let's prove that this can work, not just for us, but as a model for other companies in our industry. If done right, we can generate tangible benefits. It needs to be sustainable, not just a flash in the pan. As Jack voiced his hopes, he felt intertwining threads of visions, fears, and aspirations. Around him, the energy shifted, as if they were collaboratively shaping the genesis of something profound. Yet, just as the momentum seemed to crest, Thomas's carefully curated facade began to crack. Jack, let's not get lost in dreams. There is a fine line between vision and foolhardiness. In that moment, Jack understood the depth of their battle. Would he stand ground in pursuit of a noble vision, even if it risked everything he had earned? The path unfolded before him, layered with choices, each demanding immense courage. As he grappled with potential futures, a thought coalesced. The stakes were not just for the company, but for his own renewal. What he didn't yet comprehend was that the journey required not only leading others, but, more crucially, learning to lead himself beyond the shadows of doubt. And with that realization, the weight of his journey shifted. The moment had come to confront not just Thomas, but the entrenched fears of his own heart. Would he be brave enough to embrace the unknown despite the fear of failure? Or would he falter yet again, allowing the chains of his insecurities to bind him to conformity? As Jack stood in the conference room, the walls felt like they were closing in on him. The glimmer of support he had felt moments ago quickly dimmed under the weight of Thomas's skepticism. Doubts coiled in his gut, tightening like a vice around his resolve. Had he miscalculated? Was this push against the status quo merely an act of hubris? In the silence that stretched painfully after Thomas's judgment, Jack's thoughts spiraled. He recognized that the internal struggle mirrored Thomas's external response. The elder executive, entrenched by tradition, represented everything he was trying to escape. Jack felt a desperate urgency to overcome it. This wasn't just about business. It was about uprooting generations of complacency. Maybe, he thought anxiously, I can make them see the potential. He began crafting a mental bridge between what he stood for and the fears swirling in the room. He needed to connect emotionally with the team, not simply present facts and figures. Remember, he finally said, locking eyes with Maya and a few others, a bold vision ignites passion, and passion drives performance. If we can illustrate that our strategies will resonate with our customers and elevate our brand identity, we won't just be selling products, we'll be selling ideals. Isn't that worth a shot? Maya's nod grew more resolute, and the others' expressions shifted toward curiosity rather than doubt. There was a glimmer of possibility, a flicker, a renewed spark of ambition. Jack sensed his chance to pivot. How about this? We host a series of small focus groups with customers. We can understand their values and desires and see how they align with our mission. Coupled with a financial performance report, that data could speak volumes to shareholders. The idea felt liberating. Jack was constructing the foundation for not just a project, but a potential transformation in how the company could engage with the world. He recognized how crucial this step was, not just for approval, but for his own evolution. He was forcing himself to confront not only corporate conservatism, but also the emotional limits he had long accepted. In those focus groups, we can dive deeper. What resonates? What do they want to see? The words tumbled out, propelled by his newfound confidence. But Thomas stood firm, unconvinced. You still haven't answered the most important question. What if it fails? His gaze bore into Jack, a challenge cloaked in concern. A misadventure could lead to significant losses, a blow to our reputation. In that moment, Jack felt a profound wave of clarity. Thomas, we're already risking our reputation by standing still. True failure lies in stagnation. Consumers today are individuals. They want to attach themselves to something authentically human. If we don't adapt, we will fail collectively, and it won't be for lack of trying. As he spoke, the energy in the room shifted gradually, the spectators absorbing his words. Perhaps there was an internal shift already simmering in Thomas, one influenced by Jack's spirit. And yet, with every passing second, Jack realized he was not simply challenging Thomas or the board. He was confronting his fears head-on. Though every assertion he made peeled back layers of uncertainty, the lingering question remained. Was he prepared to take that leap, not just for the team, but for himself? As the meeting continued, Jack felt liberated yet perilously exposed, like skydiving without a parachute. There was no safety net of familiarity underneath, only the risk of pushing through the unknown. He could sense the thrill of potential, both exhilarating and terrifying. By the time the meeting ended, a resolve had settled into him like a newly formed muscle. He understood that he was embarking on uncharted territory, not just for the company's future, but for his own personal growth. He faced a pivotal moment where he would either ignite change or settle into the safe embrace of complacency once more. As he exited the conference room, a series of urgent questions loomed over him. Would he muster the courage to follow through? Could he inspire those resistant to change? And most hauntingly, what would happen if he discovered the hidden strengths within himself that he had yet to tap into? The moment held electric tension, teetering on the edge of possibility, Jack wading into murky waters, unsure if the depths would offer him the clarity he so desperately desired. The next move lay ahead, and with it came whispers of destiny and risk. Would he tread where few dared to go, or would he retreat into familiar shadows? The weeks that followed were monumental for Jack Bennett. Each day became a new opportunity to push boundaries, not only within his company, but within himself. Armed with a renewed sense of purpose, he took definitive strides toward implementing the community development fund he and Lily had envisioned. Jack rallied his executive team, slowly but surely turning skeptics into supporters. He shared inspiring stories alongside hard data, demonstrating that profit and purpose could coexist in harmony. The first community event was a resounding success. Their pilot initiative, which provided job training for local youths, not only engaged employees, but also fostered relationships with the community. Jack realized the depth of fulfillment he felt could not be quantified by stock prices, but rather through the genuine gratitude expressed by the recipients. He learned that the impact was reciprocal. As he lifted others, he found himself elevated as well. His confidence grew remarkably, shifting from a solitary fortress of wealth to a bridge of collaboration and empathy. One evening, Jack stood in the newly renovated community center, nearby families enjoying the fruits of the program they launched. Children played in the newly created park space, laughter echoing like music, a stark contrast to the sterile silence of boardroom discussions once dominated by bottom lines. He recognized this profound moment as his new legacy. As he gazed around, Jack felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. His transformation was visible in the conversations he had with locals, nurturing relationships that expanded beyond profit margins. He had transformed from a distant billionaire into a compassionate leader. This metamorphosis did not go unnoticed by his colleagues. They started to shift their perspectives as well, aligning their initiatives with the newfound mission. Finally, a pivotal moment arose when Jack proposed the comprehensive impact strategy during the quarterly meeting. Months ago, He would have cowered under the weight of their scrutiny. Now, he stood tall, fortified by the change he had instigated. He framed it as a complete overhaul, designed to enhance brand loyalty and community engagement, inviting stakeholders to imagine the ripple effects of their decisions. He captivated his audience with stories of change, igniting a collective aspiration to contribute. After the presentation, the room buzzed with intrigue, setting in motion discussions that delved deep into potential partnerships for greater impact. For once, Jack wasn't anxious about their reactions. He felt empowered, resolute in the belief that they were venturing into a new era of responsible capitalism. Existing relationships expanded, and the firm experienced a new influx of interest from investors eager to support this bold direction. Yet, one lingering challenge remained: Thomas. Throughout the journey, the CFO had shifted from disdain to skepticism, but remained cautious of drumming up momentum behind a vision he did not believe in. As Jack prepared to combat the final resistant barrier, he understood now that Thomas was a manifestation of every doubt he had ever faced, a reflection of his old self that he desperately needed to confront. "Thomas," Jack said during their follow-up meeting, his intent focused. "You fear this change could be damaging, but let's consider the alternative. By clinging to traditional measures, we're not safeguarding our legacy, but stifling our growth." A mixture of urgency and vulnerability dictated his tone. The directness pulled Thomas from his guarded demeanor, revealing traces of vulnerability. "Jack, this is a gamble," he countered, but the weight of Jack's conviction softened his rigidity. Point by point, Jack articulated the compelling shift from isolated metrics to a broader, more impactful measure of success, crafting a vision that aligned with both their professional goals and personal values. As he spoke, Jack recognized a shift within himself. He wasn't merely advocating for a new initiative. He was advocating for a version of himself that was becoming complete, fulfilling values he had long buried beneath the veneer of corporate dominance. He profoundly understood that true leadership thrived on authenticity and connection. Weeks later, the initiative's results began to flourish. Local media featured their work, and Jack found himself receiving invitations to speak at conferences focused on corporate responsibility and innovation. The recognition felt deserved. He had walked the arduous path from a billionaire whose sole focus had been wealth to a leader who championed compassion and integrity. Jack stood at a podium, sharing stories of the community's resilience and transformative power, witnessing firsthand the visceral impact of aligning purpose with performance. His once silent heart now sang with pride, not for mere success, but for genuine connection. As the session concluded, applause rang out, and an overwhelming sense of assurance washed over him. He had ascended from uncertainty, not solely as a professional, but as a fulfilled individual. Jack was no longer merely a figure of affluence. He became a beacon for what empathetic leadership could achieve. Surveying the crowd, he felt the full weight of his journey, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt, the bonds formed, all coalescing into deep personal fulfillment. Jack Bennett had obliterated the notion of isolation. He had learned that true success is measured not only in wealth, but by the lives touched along the way. Now, as he looked forward to the horizon of untapped possibilities, a singular truth blossomed within him. He was more than his wealth. He was a catalyst for change. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of actions like these.